Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, whenever you are. Hello, thank you for watching my videos. It's Mike, it's February 26th, 2009. Don't panic! White van man slows down. Yeah. Okay, so dark days for white van man. Prompt Northgate warning. Okay, so this is the Financial Times. My ever favorite paper. Basically, there's an outfit in the UK called Northgate. And their big claim to fame is they rent vans. They rent lots of vans. Now, for people outside of the UK, you may never have heard of the term white van man, so let me explain. White van man is basically your builder, your, home repair guy, your plumber, etc. And they'll go trundling all over the country, generally driving either insanely or too slow, depending on the particular mood or the shift of the wind or whether they're distracted by the pile of papers sitting on the dashboard, newspapers. But I mean, it's obviously a generalization. But anyway, but it's bad news for the white van man, because obviously this is not a lot of work for him. And Northgate, their big business was renting vans out to companies. And again, if you look on the front page of the business section of today's Telegraph, which unfortunately I couldn't link, but the FT article is linked. You can see a nice picture of white van man. Oh dear. White van man, and written on there, "We are defleeting as quickly as possible." Which is rather sad. And the FT article is quite funny at the end. "In spite of current woes, there is little doubt that white van man will ride again once the construction cycle turns. But the horn-blaring, gesticulating, genuine article may survive only in such pockets as the self-employed sector. According to Robert Dickinson of the SMMT, employers with fleets of vans are increasingly equipping them with devices to record driving patterns. So they'll be able to tell if they've been speeding or braking suddenly in front of you, so on and so forth. So it is the end of white van man. It's very sad. Moving on to real news. There will be blood, so says Niall Ferguson. Basically going on to say, we're going to be seeing, this is the beginning of what he's terming the Great Recession. Of course, I thought it was going to be called the Great Slump or, the Greater Depression, but whatever. He's previously been calling the time up to this moment, the Great Repression. Basically, government and leaders everywhere going, "No, there's nothing wrong, don't freak out. Confidence is what we need, confidence!" Yeah, so anyway. So it's a good article, a good interview with Niall Ferguson. You may remember him as the author of The Ascent of Money, which is a very good book, and goes into a lot of historical detail as to what happened with boom cycles and bubbles across the centuries. Okay, from the Telegraph today, "Recession is grim no matter how bored we are of economic doom and gloom." Now, the main point of this article I wanted to highlight, let me just pull it up here, is buried down in the bottom of it. Basically saying, effectively agreeing with some of my earlier videos that I made a couple of months ago, which people criticized because I was being insane. You're insane, you're insane, telling people this stuff. Basically saying, yep, quantitative easing is similar to printing money. The only way we can really stimulate the economy right now is to invigorate it with an influx of monetary supply. But the important thing is to monitor inflation. And if inflation starts turning around, quickly reel it back in, or we shall be facing days of hyperinflation. I'm glad to see someone at the Telegraph is paying attention and has finally figured this one out. Okay. The blame game continues. Okay, so I told you, I believe I mentioned last week that, the government is blaming the bankers are blaming the government, and then the government started blaming the regulators, and now the regulator, FSA, the Financial Services Authority, the regulator of banks here in England, has turned around and said, well, actually, it's down to Gordon Brown. Gordon Brown told us to relax our standards a few years back. It's all his fault. Never mind. And so it continues back and forth. Ping pong, ping pong. Nobody wants the hot potato. Now, I found this quite interesting. A viewer sent me this. Ex-Treasury official confirms gold suppression scheme. Okay, so this is an outfit called the GATA, which is the, find it here, which is the Gold Antitrust Action Committee. Basically saying that the US Treasury has been messing with the price of gold. And there is a confirmation in the last sentence. How long can the US government protect the dollar's value by leasing its gold to bullion dealers who sell it, thereby holding down the gold price? So, George Vertitel has a recent video up saying that he's getting indications from an inside source that they're shifting a lot of gold over to Fort Knox, moving it in. Whereas previously they were selling a lot of gold and leasing it out and buying it back and so forth, doing nonsense like that. Well, now apparently, according to George Vertitel's source, the gold is going back to Fort Knox. And Fort Knox is building up its reserves, perhaps in anticipation of a switch from US dollar to another currency backed by gold and silver. And we'll discuss the SPP, the partnership between Canada, America, and Mexico in my next video. But it's all looking very, very, very worrying now. Okay, now, this morning I was trolling around, I looked at Market Watch, and one of their top stories was GM announces a huge loss, $9.8 billion in the fourth quarter, something like that. And in there they had a little article that says why GM matters, why General Motors matters. Basically buying into the whole PR from GM that, you know, if GM goes, then all these extra supply companies will go and it'll be a huge hit on the economy and blah, 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 and this is why we should support them. The real reason you should be supporting them is highlighted in an article today from The Guardian. The Guardian article, banks face new wave of losses on CDS contracts, analysts warn. And let me just pull that up. Banks in Europe and the US face a new wave of losses linked to contracts issued to insure against companies going bust and defaulting on their loans. Now, the Guardian article really doesn't go into any great detail as to how these things all interrelate. But let me do a little bit of a catch-up for you, for those people who missed some of my earlier videos about synthetic CDOs and weird collateralized debt obligations and all this other nonsense that's out there in the derivatives market. Essentially, there's a whole bunch of credit default swaps that are based upon the viability of General Motors bonds. Okay, General Motors issues bonds. And people that buy these bonds then also bought credit default protection. So this credit default swap is basically a protection that if GM goes broke, the insurance companies will pay to the bondholders the amount of money they gave to GM. Sadly then, these debt obligations, these loan obligations, these credit default obligations were then bundled together into other things. Okay? And not the whole thing. I mean, if you watched the videos yesterday about how these CDOs and CDSs and everything all connects together, they didn't sell everything to outside investors. No, they took little bits and pieces and shoved them together and made other little financial instruments, and then they sold them to investors. Now, what happens is, if GM goes broke, all of those credit default obligations will get called in. And in turn, this will unravel all of these more complex financial instruments that sit upon all of that. And what's sitting on top of that is worth tens of trillions of dollars. And guess what? The way they package these things, and I've included a Nomura article that explains in great detail how synthetic CDOs get built. And I mean, it's right near the end of this PDF, and it's really complicated getting through it, and I'm sorry, if you really want to understand this, you are going to have to read it. But anyway, basically the idea being, an investor purchases this synthetic CDO, okay, and then he's paid a dividend, and receives payments, okay. If the synthetic CDO goes broke, the investor is on the hook for the value of the investment he made. So he has to go and find the money. So this is like, the whole thing about, your investments may go up as well as down. And this whole idea of be very careful playing hedge markets and money markets and stuff, because if the value goes down, you're on the line for the amount of money. And this was not explained to a lot of the people out there that bought these things. So that's why GM matters. That's why the government is not letting General Motors collapse. Now, for a better understanding of what's going to happen in the future with General Motors and Chrysler and how this all interconnects and what people do with it and who the investors are and where the money's going to go, DebTruth has been doing a real good series on General Motors and Chrysler and Cerberus and how they all link together and how it apparently is all linking back to certain people in the government. And there's all kinds of kickbacks and all kinds of weird stuff happening. And you should really watch those videos. 1 through 4 at the moment. I think she's working on a 5th one. But you'll get a really good understanding of how all these different companies interconnect and how everybody's getting kickbacks everywhere. And you wonder why people think government is corrupt. Okay, and to finish off, a funny video of the day from The Onion. The FDA approves depressant drug for the annoyingly cheerful. I used to be called annoyingly cheerful. Can you believe it? Mr. Gloom and Doom here. I was Mr. Smiley at one point. Oh well, never mind. Everyone have a good day. Peace, love, understanding. Learn, and you will understand. Bye.